mythologies, welcome to a new video. Today we are doing part 3 of what inspired these Mortal Kombat characters, covering Mortal Kombat 3, but not just Mortal Kombat 3, the regular version. No, we're also going to be doing the newcomers from Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, as well as Mortal Kombat Trilogy. So, this is probably going to be a pretty long video. I'm thinking this is going to be the last part in this series just because the 3D era and NRS characters simply don't have as interesting of origins or inspirations as the 2D era characters, but there are a few exceptions, so I might do a sort of final video where I cover the most interesting of those characters instead of every single one. But that's only if you guys really enjoy this video, and if you do, then you should definitely check out my future content. Easiest way to do that is by subscribing and turning on the notification bell. It would also be really nice if you gave this video a like and comment down below which of these inspirations was the most shocking to you. Now, something you'll notice with Mortal Kombat 3 throughout this video is that it's much more surrounded in Western and pop culture instead of the Asian cultures and mythologies of Mortal Kombat 2 and especially Mortal Kombat 1. And I think that's the most apparent with not the first character on this list, but the first 3. Ah yes, the Cyber Ninjas, probably the most popular characters to come out of this third game. And there's 3 of them. How fitting. Now obviously in the first part of this series we covered the normal Japanese ninja, like Scorpion, who were real. But as far as I'm aware, Cyber Ninjas do not exist, and they never have. Now yes, the Cyber Ninjas are Lin Kuei, who technically aren't ninjas, but assassins. Doesn't really matter, there haven't been cyber assassins either, as far as I'm aware. And based on what I've researched, no sort of robotics technology that's advanced like this has really been covered in any sort of ancient mythology like Japanese or Chinese mythology. So for these cyber ninjas, or ninjas, we're gonna have to look to pop culture, and there's a lot. Now if we take away the designs of these characters from the later games, because they just kind of look like a mess of a bunch of different pieces and technology and parts and plates and stuff, they look ugly. That's my opinion. I know some people like these designs, but I don't like them. They can get out of here. But if we look to more classic designs, then the inspirations are a bit more obvious. Especially if you just look at certain sections of their body. Like, for example, their torso is straight up just RoboCop, but with ketchup all over him. Another example, if you take the head, oh wow, that's the Predator, but with mustard all over him. And I guess that's the best way to describe these designs, a fusion between RoboCop and the Predator, who are obviously major action movie characters from the 80s. And of course, these two characters would eventually appear as guests within the Mortal Kombat franchise later down the line. RoboCop even got some costumes that made him look like the Cyber Ninjas, and it just made everyone sad, because where are they? Where are they, NRS? Come on, they were in the data files, they were in the story mode, why aren't they in the game? That's just, it's criminal. Criminal. But you can't just fuse RoboCop and Predator and then duplicate that character twice. They have to have actual differences, so let's cover what makes these 3 characters unique. Now when it comes to Smoke's backstory and powers, we already covered all of that in the previous video when he was featured as a human in Mortal Kombat 2. But what are some of the things that change when he becomes a cyborg? Well, the first thing is that they changed his color from gray to purple, and I'm not quite sure why they did this because obviously Smoke is gray, so they had it right the first time. Not sure why it's purple now. I do like the purple better, I think it looks better, but doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. He also has this harpoon thing that shoots out of his chest and grabs people. That's obviously a reference to Scorpion's get over here move that they kind of wanted to replicate. Same thing with his teleport, which is just a move carried over from Sektor, as well as his throw that he does. I believe that's a move from Cyrax, or at least a very similar one. And then his final special ability, the invisibility, is something carried over from Reptile, so it's pretty disappointing. Smoke kind of got the short end of the stick when it comes to the 3 cyborgs. He just doesn't really have anything unique about him. Now moving on to Cyrax. For him and Sektor, I'm not too sure what the official origin is, but I can kind of get an idea from what their original names were before they actually got their official names. Yep, that's right, ketchup and mustard. That's probably where their colors come from, just the condiments that you put on burgers and hot dogs. Now when it comes to the abilities that Cyrax has, most of it seems pretty original. I mean, there's bombs, which is just like a general thing. Like, Mortal Kombat didn't invent the idea of bombs, so there's that. Then he also has his teleport, which is a really cool teleport. He like explodes into pieces and then comes back. But that seems to be an original thing. I haven't seen any sort of robot teleport where he explodes and then comes back together. The only thing that I could really find something on is his net thing that he explodes out of his chest, which seems very similar to something the Predator uses in Predator 2. It's like a net gun that goes over someone, makes them not able to move. I don't know why it's so hard for me to just explain that. Like, it's not a hard concept. And lastly, Cyrax has a fatality, which is a reference to the ending of Predator. Oh my god, there's so many Predator references.
You actually did it. You're a cyborg.
We are the Li Kuei, more stealthful than the night, more deadly than the dawn.
Now we're on to the sometimes Grandmaster of the Lin Kuei, sometimes Grandmaster of the Dakunin, sometimes just a guy, Sektor. Now, other than his color probably being based off of ketchup, the condiment that is better than mustard, just saying, mustard isn't very good. I personally don't put it on any of my stuff. That's irrelevant. Other than that, he doesn't really have too many inspirations that I could find that weren't just like general things like rocket launchers and flamethrowers. Just normal stuff. Yeah, nothing really clear or specific that I could find, but if you guys have an idea for one of Sektor's inspirations, then comment them down below, because I'm kind of stumped here. But enough about the cyborgs, let's move on to the rest of the cast of Mortal Kombat 3.
He's about to get his soul sucked. I love the scream right before the...
Ah yes, the man who has climbed to my top 5 favorite Mortal Kombat characters solely because of the memes. We have Kabal, who is another great example of pop culture defining the Mortal Kombat 3 characters, because his main inspiration seems to be The Flash from DC. Which you wouldn't really guess by looking at them, but Ed Boon is apparently a huge DC and just comic books in general fan, so he wanted a character that was sort of a speedster, and that's how we got Kabal. But when you look at Kabal and you think of what inspirations he might have, I think the most interesting thing that most people would want to learn about are his hook swords. These are Chinese weapons used relatively recently, especially compared to a lot of weapons featured in Mortal Kombat, but while they're not ancient, you're still not just going to see people holding them walking around in the modern day. At least I hope not. They were also very rarely used, mostly just for training, but never really for combat or military scenarios. Now, the way Kabal uses these swords isn't really how they were actually used. He uses them to like hook into people, and gouge out their intestines from their stomach and make them spill all over the floor. Well, that's not really how they were actually used. Traditionally, they were just like normal swords, and the hook part was only used to grab weapons and trip people. And while yes, Kabal does sometimes trip people with the hooks or grab them and start running around with them, he never really uses them as just like normal swords. He also doesn't really use the bottom part of the sword, which is very sharp and would probably be pretty useful in combat, but obviously the game developers are going to make him use the actual hooks more, because that's the unique and flashy part of the weapon, as opposed to just having him use them as normal swords. Kabal is also quite often described as a nomad, which I'm not quite too sure about, because nomads are generally defined as people who never really settle or live in one place, but just kind of move from place to place. Oh, I get it now, because he's a speedster and he moves. That's actually really clever, if it's intentional. Even if it isn't, still pretty cool. Let's get to the part of Kabal we've all been waiting for, his
Iron Lung.
Now, Kabal has these burns and scars all across his body, which very similar to Freddy Krueger, especially Mortal Kombat 9, which is the game that Freddy Krueger is in. And, you know, his skin actually looks more like Freddy Krueger than the Freddy Krueger in that game does. But that's because that Freddy Krueger sucks, and it's the remake version, which is awful. But what about that mask that keeps him alive? Well, just looking at it, as well as knowing Cabal's backstory, I am pretty confident that it's based on Darth Vader. Now, I don't think it's ever been confirmed that the mask is based on Darth Vader's, but I'm pretty confident. I mean, just look at the triangle shape over the mouth and those beady dark eyes. I think it's pretty safe to say. But the last thing that I want to talk about with Cabal is his name, Cabal. Where does it come from? There's a few different explanations here, and the first one is just the name, Cabal, which is of Indian origin, and it means clever, intelligent, and active. Only one of those really makes a whole lot of sense, because Cabal is not the smartest. But active does apply, because, you know. But another thing Cabal's name could mean is that it's the Hebrew name for capacitor. What does that mean? Okay, so according to Wikipedia, a capacitor is a device that stores electrical energy in an electric field by virtue of accumulating electric charges on two close surfaces insulated from each other. Let's look at the third explanation. Cabal can also be used to describe a secret organization, but the thing is that it's Cabal with a C instead of Cabal with a K. But Mortal Kombat is always changing C's to K's, so I think it's fair to say that of the options we have, that one's the most likely. And now we have the Queen of Edenia and mother to Kitana, who unfortunately killed herself because she didn't want to be stuck with Shao Kahn for the rest of her life. It would have been very long because she's Edenian and they live for quite a while. Then she was resurrected as an evil version of herself. But she snapped out of it and her and Kitana made up. Hooray! Now just looking at Sindel, her most obvious inspiration to me are those ghoulish women from the old black and white horror movies and series like Lily Munster or The Bride of Frankenstein. It's the hair and the makeup that just gives her that gothic aesthetic. But if you look to her actual outfit, that is obviously not gothic at all. It's very colorful, so I really like the contrast. Now what about her powers? Well, some of them are just kind of general, like flying. That is one of the most common powers to see, so there's no real inspiration that I can get from there. But her two more unique powers I could find a little more on. Firstly, with her hair manipulation, where she can grow her hair and make it like grab onto people and spin them around so fast they blow up. That's Mortal Kombat for you. Now I really struggle researching this, one because it's not a super common or popular power, and two because I couldn't find any good search terms. It was all just how to make your hair grow, how to put in hair extensions. I don't want that stuff. I want superpowers, god dang it. I did find a lot of stuff with anime, so do with that what you will. I mean, Mortal Kombat anime, not too different. If I looked at the Legends movies and I just didn't know anything about Mortal Kombat, I'd probably assume it's anime. Besides for Snowblind though. That looks like an episode of Archer. But the main thing that I did find was a Marvel character named Medusa. I mean, they have a full name, but I'm not even going to try to pronounce that. And her main power is growing her hair. She's an Inhuman, so she's like kind of with Black Bolt and that whole group of people. It's not very popular though, so I'm not 100% sure on this. Actually, now that I think about it, it's probably not. So, I don't know. This is the closest thing I can find. But with her screaming abilities, first of all, there's the DC character Black Canary, who her powers are most similar to, as opposed to, what I'll talk about next, a Banshee. A Banshee is a spirit in Irish folklore that alerts the incoming death of someone by screaming or wailing. God. Banshees were real? I'd hate to work at a nursing home. So annoying. But Sindel's powers, like I said earlier, are most similar to a character like Black Canary, who actually like hurts people and has kinetic energy with their screams, as opposed to a Banshee which just screams normally, and that's it. That's about all I could find on Sindel. Now let's move on to a character who, fun fact, was actually played by the same voice actor who voiced Sindel in Mortal Kombat 9. Shiva. Now, there's not going to be much here just because I already covered Goro in the first part to this series, and there really aren't too many differences when it comes to inspirations behind the character. She's really just a female Goro, which makes it so that her inspirations are pretty much the same. In fact, Goro's inspirations she's actually more accurate to, as her name, Shiva, comes from the Hindu goddess Shiva, who was the inspiration for Goro. It's pretty cool. But something that I didn't mention in my first video, which was actually an inspiration for Goro and Shiva, was the character of Kali from the Voyage of Sinbad movie. Kali was basically this moving stop-motion statue that had multiple arms, which makes sense because Goro and Shiva are actually stop-motion characters. They're not played by anybody. Not quite sure why I had to, like, reiterate that they're not played by anybody. It's pretty obvious. There's no living person with 4 arms, I don't think. And even if they do, they probably don't look as fancy or stylish as Goro or Shiva's 4 arms. You know, the extra arms are probably just like little and stubby and not fully developed. Okay, I'm taking this joke way too far. But yeah, that's really about it to talk about with Shiva. She's literally just female Goro. A lot of her moves are the same. Her weapons are non-existent up until Mortal Kombat 11, but those weapons are kind of just basics, just a shield, and, you know, everyone knows what a freaking shield is. And when it comes to her outfit, there's not much outfit to talk about, is there? But now let's move on to a character who has an even shorter section than Shiva does.
Like moths to flame, they would be drawn to battle.
Stryker is a cop. Now let's go on to the character that I think everyone will agree is the most interesting part of the video, Nightwolf. In fact, not only will he probably be the most interesting part of this video, but he might be the most interesting character we've covered so far, with his pretty extensive background in the entirety of the Native American history and those tribes and their ideologies, their religion. It's going to be a lot to cover. Something that's going to be difficult with this character is the fact that from place to place, from tribe to tribe, his culture is wildly different across the board. So there's going to be differing ways of life. There's going to be differing religions. Even if it's small, it's going to make a pretty big impact to how I can actually apply this to the character, but I'll try my best. And something that really doesn't help at all is that Nightwolf is a part of a fictional tribe, so I can't actually do research on a tribe that really exist, so it's going to be way harder than it probably would have been. So yeah, Nightwolf is a part of the Matoka tribe, which, like I said, is a fictional tribe that we know next to nothing about, besides that it has its ancient warrior passed down from generation to generation, Nightwolf. So Nightwolf is actually a mantle and not a name. Nightwolf's name is not Nightwolf. His actual name is Gray Cloud. Yeah, I'm going to need some of my experts and researchers to confirm whether or not that's accurate to the actual naming system of Native Americans, because I'm kind of suspicious of a name like Gray Cloud. Gray Cloud. But let's start with probably the most simple thing that we can talk about, his weapons. Now, sometimes Nightwolf's weapons are like spiritually made, like they're bright green and he just summons them out of nowhere. And obviously that's not a thing, but sometimes his weapons are actually real, so that's what we'll talk about. Now, Nightwolf's main and most popular weapon is the tomahawk, which is also a very popular image and actual weapon in indigenous history. It was used as a general purpose tool, so it could do a lot of different things like chopping wood or chopping people's skulls, anything like that. Now, originally these weapons were either made out of stone or bone, but the version that Nightwolf usually uses is the one that the European settlers introduced, which are the metal versions. In other words, Nightwolf is a traitor! Another one of Nightwolf's more popular weapons is the bow and arrow, which is not just a Native American or indigenous thing. It's been used across many cultures for a very, very long time that I can't really specify which one exactly. And then finally, a weapon which is very much tied to indigenous culture is the gunstock war club. It's a bit more of a modern weapon, and its whole shape was kind of used to trick people into thinking, oh, this dude has a gun that they can use to shoot me. That's not good. So I'm gonna like run away now. But it is not a gun. It has no long range capabilities. It's just a club with a spike on the end that you beat people with. All right, Nightwolf's weapons are out of the way. Now we gotta get to the more complicated stuff, like his abilities and powers and what they're based off of. Now, like I said earlier, when it comes to the spirit weapons, that's just something completely out of whack that is not a thing at all, like not even in religion or the culture that at least I could find. Nightwolf can also summon lightning, and while yes, in some cultures and religions there were belief that lightning signified something or that it was more spiritual than what it actually is, Nightwolf can just straight up summon it out of nowhere, and that's not a thing. The closest power I could find that actually has some merit is the spirit animals that he brings along in Mortal Kombat 11. Basically, in shamanism, which is what Nightwolf is, a shaman, which we'll talk about later, there was a belief that the shaman could interact with the spirit world and spirits, which could manifest as animals. Although I'm pretty sure they cannot rip people in half. So yeah, overall, when it comes to Nightwolf's powers, a lot of it is just like making stuff up or exaggerating concepts that aren't really as exciting as they are in the games. And you know, depicting Native Americans as spiritual people is something that's kind of problematic for some people. I don't have a place in the matter. I'm not going to talk about it or give my opinion, mostly because I don't have one, but also I just don't want to get in trouble because that's not what we're here to talk about. All right, let's just move on. As I was saying earlier, Nightwolf is a shaman who is someone that is believed to be able to interact with the spirit world and can also treat and heal people. Yeah, Nightwolf, healer, I can see that. But besides being able to interact with his ancestors and the Great Spirit, which is a real thing by the way, the Great Spirit is not something made up for Mortal Kombat, it's something that's really in indigenous culture and religion. He doesn't really have too many aspects of an actual shaman. He doesn't have the same believed abilities, he doesn't have the same mindset, he doesn't have that goal of healing and treating people. He wants to beat people up to protect his tribe, so for a good cause. But you guys, I think that's about it for what I want to cover for Nightwolf in this video. There's still so much. I mean, I haven't even touched on his design or anything at all, like what the war paint means. I don't know, maybe I'll make a full video about it in the future, but right now, that's all I want to talk about. Let's move on to the next character. And now we are moving on to Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 with Ermac. Now, besides for the big inspiration that we'll get to later, Ermac does have some aspects of soul dualism, which is actually something in some Native American religion, is something that is believed that the shaman can do. Basically, soul dualism is having multiple souls in one body, which is quite literally the definition of Ermac. They are a bunch of different souls inside of one body, all of the souls that Shao Kahn has collected inside of one Ermac-shaped body. Ermac's wrapped look is also pretty obviously inspired by the mummies from ancient Egypt, and it kind of makes sense because they have to have the wraps to hold all the souls in together. Man, Ermac's so cool. I wish they did more with him. But, you know, the most obvious inspiration for Ermac is not something in any culture or mythology or anything like that. His most obvious inspiration is actually from Mortal Kombat 1. Basically, in the diagnostics menu of MK1, there was a macro made for catching errors in the code, and it was called Ermac. And unfortunately, it was displayed right under Reptile, the secret fight. So it made it look like there was a Reptile secret fight and an Ermac secret fight. And the fact that it's called Ermac, which is plural, is probably why Ermac is multiple souls in one body. But anyways, this started a rumor within the Mortal Kombat community at the time that Ermac was a secret fight in Mortal Kombat 1 that had to be unlocked somehow, just like with Reptile. But this was not the case. There was no such thing as Ermac in MK1, and they eventually removed the error macros text from the game, which just added fuel to the fire because people were like, oh, they removed the secret character, what's going on here? When they just removed an error macro from the diagnostics menu. And then in Mortal Kombat 2, they actually reference Ermac by saying just straight up, Ermac does not exist, which he didn't until Mortal Kombat 3, or Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, where he finally became a playable character. So yeah, that's the main reason why Ermac even exists. He was never meant to be an actual character within the story. He was kind of just added because he was a rumor that they decided, hey, let's make him playable. And then that's it. who knew that in the 3D era he would actually become a pretty important character? And then job to everyone in the new timeline. Next up, we have Mortal Kombat Trilogy with Rain, the purple ninja of the Mortal Kombat franchise, the Prince of Edenia, the son of Argus, and also a pretty big a-hole. Now, Rain was featured in the Attract mode of Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3. He was not actually playable, he was just a red herring for people to go, oh my god, this character exists, how can I play as him, how can I fight against him, how do I interact with him at all? But like I said, he was just a red herring. He didn't actually exist until Mortal Kombat Trilogy. Now, as the name suggests, Rain has the power of hydrokinesis, or controlling water, rain, and he can also summon lightning, thunder, rain. Makes sense. And yeah, so his name makes sense with his powers, and his powers make sense with his design. Not really though, does it? Because his design is purple. But Rain is not purple. Rain is like blue, clear. So how do these fit together? Well, think about it. Purple, rain. Oh, the Prince song. And wait, Rain is the Prince of Edenia. Yep, turns out Ed Boon is a pretty big Prince fan. And that's legitimately who the character is based off of, which is pretty cool. But it makes his Mortal Kombat 11 fatality all the more confusing because they reference Queen. Either someone made a mistake there, or that's like the most confusing reference ever. But you can't see it because my head is in the way. I have the poster based off of that fatality on my wall right here. It doesn't really make sense that Rain isn't actually on it, but whatever. But let's talk about Rain's Mortal Kombat 11 weapon, the Katar. This is an Indian subcontinent weapon, which is sort of like a dagger, kind of. It rests on your knuckles, so it goes out here, you hold the actual handle like through here, and yeah, it's pretty cool. Now, the version that Rain has can actually split into 3 parts, which is not something that most versions of the weapon use, but there are some that do have sort of features like that. It's nothing really like completely 100% to how it is in the games, but it's sort of accurate in a way. And yeah, that's about it for Rain. I mean, his inspiration is probably one of the more popular ones in the Mortal Kombat community. Everyone likes talking about it. And yeah, I like it as well. Let's move on. Next up, we have the 2 Chameleons, Chameleon with a C and Chameleon with a K. And the simple answer here is just all the rest of the ninjas that we've covered so far. So Scorpion, Sub-Zero, Noob, Saibot, Smoke, all those guys. And then for the Chameleon with a K, it's Katana, Melina, Jade, all those people. And yeah, that's about it. I mean, they have the most similarity to Reptile because they're a part of the same race, but really, they don't have any inspirations other than that. I mean, Chameleon with a C from Mortal Kombat Armageddon kind of reminds me of Chameleon from Marvel, mostly because they're both bald.
Look at the top of his head!
But yeah, I'm mostly just grasping at straws here. Let's move on to the final character we have. Finally, we have the sub-boss of Mortal Kombat 3. We won't be covering the main boss because it's Shao Kahn. We already covered him in Mortal Kombat 2. But we have Motaro, the Centaur, which is a pretty well-known mythical creature in Greek and Roman mythology. It has the lower body of a horse and an upper body of a human, which is pretty freaky if you try and think about it in real life. But yeah, centaurs are creatures that most of the general public very well know about just because of books like Narnia and Harry Potter, as well as the movie adaptations of those, so I don't have to go too deep into it. I think most people know what I'm talking about. But for Motaro specifically, there's an even more specific inspiration, and that's the Micronauts figure of Baron Karza, which is actually a Marvel character, did not know that, and his horse, Andromeda. Basically, you could take these figures and mix and match them. So people took the upper body of Baron Karza and put him on the lower body of Andromeda, and you got like a weird robot centaur. And that's what Motaro is based off of. If you didn't know, Motaro is actually a cyborg. He has that huge robot tail that like shoots lasers and stuff. It's really cool. And he's definitely not as robotic as Baron Karza and Andromeda, but that's kind of where the centaur aspects comes in. So just fuse everything together and you basically got Motaro. And yeah, that's it for what inspired these Mortal Kombat characters, part 3, potentially the final part. Like I said at the beginning of the video, if you guys really want me to do a final part where I cover the more interesting characters in Mortal Kombat, then definitely make sure to comment that down below. Also make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. With that being said, that's for this video, my fellow oddities. I'll see you next time.